Alright, so I'm going to go through this new tutorial type. I guess we'll call it a session review tutorial. And later on I'll get you guys to record sessions and then we can review them. So basically what I've done is I've recorded myself playing a couple of hours of a session at the micros, and we're just going to go and review it. So this is without sound, obviously this is just a recording, and we can go through and have a look at the hands and discuss the way that I've played it and how my play might be different from your play. Everyone plays a bit differently, and there's often at especially the lower stakes there's a variety of different ways to play it, and you'll still be correct, or at least in some semblance of correct. Now, something to note about this in particular, this is on Ignition, and so it's anonymous and zone, so it's fast fold. So the combination of fast fold and anonymous makes for some really good ability to exploit a pool of opponents, and so you might see some of that here. Now, the thing about this session, was a tad distracted while I was doing it, so I was doing something on the other screen at the same time. So if I do make some mistakes or I time out or something, that's the reason. So yeah, so that first one, open min with the ace 10 suited and then fold 2 or 3 bet from the hijack. That's pretty standard even in GTO, when they pot 3 bet you.
Hey, Thomas, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So regarding open sizes of, some people have advocated a larger sizing just due to the rake, that you're more likely to take it down pre. Is that something that's valid in your opinion, or is it just fine whatever open size you want to use?
In my opinion, min is going to be the best open size to use for the majority of your hands. So you'll see here, eventually we'll get to it. I'm using a strategy where I'm splitting my range into 2 different open sizes. Basically min with the majority of my hands, and like 5 big blinds for a stronger subset of that, a stronger, more polar subset of that. Basically, opening min is pretty superior. You enter the pot, you put a little bit of pressure on the big blind. Often players will call far too wide, so then you can outplay them post flop quite easily, and you risk the least out of position. So if you're in the low jack, hijack, whatever, you're risking the least and increasing the chance that you'll play in position against the blinds. So that's usually why I like to play min. So anyone want to guess what size 3 bet I'm going to use? Oh yeah, that's pretty standard.
Biggest thought.
So another thing that I'll mention as a part of the strategy that I'm using against this pool is increasing the size of the 3 bets that I'm choosing, or that I'm using. So, and the reason why this is important is because against weaker players that don't 4 bet enough, and players that call too wide, increasing the 3 bet size is quite important against them. When you have a very strong hand like aces, kings, whatever, you'll end up winning more when they call, right? But those strong hands won't make as much money from being 4 bet because you're not being 4 bet enough of the time. So it's actually quite important to increase the 3-bet size against players that don't 4-bet enough and players who call too much. And it's actually more important to increase the 3-bet size than to widen the width of the 3-bet range. You might see it here. So you want to guess?
Oh, geez.
Yeah. About 40 cents, 4x.
I went to 75 cents.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and that's in position. I'll go even bigger out of position. And
so,
yeah.
So as a counter to that, would they just do normal 4-bet sizing through that, or would they start jamming some like 8s and 9s sort of hands to prevent you from doing that?
Yeah, as a counter, they would have to jam a bit more and call a lot less. So essentially the counter to your strategy is the exact opposite of what they're doing, right? And that's very difficult for them to actually go from what they're doing now to doing the exact opposite of what they're doing, right? So you'll find that the best exploits means that the counter to your exploit is the exact opposite of what they're currently doing, and so it's very difficult for them to shift their mindset from what they're doing currently to the exact opposite, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Now, in terms of the width of the range that I'm using, it's roughly the same that I have up on the charts. In terms of the hands being played, some hands will be a little bit different. The optional hands might not play all the time. We'll see what happens here. You honestly don't remember. So yeah, here sometimes with a hand with a double blocker. So here King Jack has 2 blockers. I'm going to use that in my larger size alongside my very strong hands like Jacks plus. And the double blocker is actually very important when you're using those hands as a bluff, because it essentially double blocks the opponent's continuing range, which is actually quite important. If you only use it with a single blocker, you'll find you'll be put into spots. You'll find the opponent will continue too often. Right. So the effect of blockers is pretty important here. Yeah, so same thing here on the left. Queen 10 on the button has double blockers to queens and 10s and a bunch of 10x hands and stuff. Yeah, so what's going on the right?
Over on the right, on the turn, is there any merit for donking?
So you have to think about what donking accomplishes. If your opponent's going to bet into you at a high frequency, donking is really bad.
Right. It's kind of similar to the multi-way principle.
Yeah. In that particular spot, I find a lot of weaker players like to continuation bet a lot. So it's often better to play quite passively until the river against them, even with a very strong hand. And the reason for that is because the opponent is going to give you all the chips that they want to put into the pot, even with their fairly marginal hands. Right? They're just going to put all the chips in that they want to give you, that they want to be put into the pot, just because they don't want to have to call a bet. which doesn't make a whole bunch of sense to me, because if they're calling a bet, sometimes your opponent can be bluffing, but if they just bet themselves, they just run into the top of the range. Anyway, yeah, so for that reason, you'll find that I'll play the very strong hands fairly passively until the river, because the opponent is going to barrel off, and that's the best way to exploit that.
Do you think you could get away with opening like 100% on the button and small blind since they don't 3-bet much at all?
No. The reason being is because often they'll call too wide, and so if you've got like a really shit hand, it's not going to play very well.
Yeah, I mean, it won't play very well, but you're guaranteed to see the flop too, and usually in position from the button.
Well, there's some hands that play so poorly that it's just not worth playing them at all.
Yeah, makes sense.
Or you not 5xing like Queen 10 suited, since that's very playable?
Yeah, so the suited variants, you'll see that I went 5x. It's mainly the offsuit variants. The suited hands are far more playable, and the ability to make a flush against weak opponents with a deep SPR is much more valuable than the blocker effects. Right, the blocker effects are pretty important when you want to use it as a bluff, as a semi bluff for the larger size. But it being suited isn't quite as important. When I'm doing it for a larger size to the 5x, the stack to pot ratio ends up being 10 if they call, roughly 10 if they call. So making a flush isn't quite as important. Of course, I'll still be using the very best suited hands, like ace queen suited, ace jack suited, king queen suited, in the larger size. So there will be some ability to make a flush on my end.
So when you 5x, for example, Queen 10 offsuit on the button, are you anticipating that they'll still call a lot, or are you doing that so that they fold a lot more?
Yeah, so in general, I'm hoping for a fold there, and the reason why I'm getting the fold is because of the double blocker effect. Now they're still going to end up calling with trash hands some of the time, but having two high cards ends up dominating that trash.
A little bit off topic since this is anonymous, but if this was not anonymous, what hands would you, how would you deviate, like King Jack offsuit, for example, from the cutoff? Would you just not be using 5x opens versus if it's not anonymous?
I mean, if it's not anonymous, you can do the same thing, right? Like how until your opponent starts to adjust properly, there's no reason why you can't keep doing what you're doing even if it's not anonymous.
Okay, now let's say you have a King Jack offsuit in the hijack position. Are there any characteristics of cutoff or button that you would deviate from your 5x besides them starting to play?
I mean, King Jack offsuit from hijack. I mean, it's towards the bottom of the range that you would open anyway. But in general, the reason why I'm opening 5x is because the opponents aren't 3-betting enough, and they'll call with hands that are easily dominated by king jack. So they'll call with queen jack suited, jack 10 suited, right?
So you don't mind
king 10
at
suited,
all
king
being
9 suited.
position.
Yeah, so with those hands, right, they perform quite well when the SPR is a bit lower, because they'll flop a strong pair and dominate the pairs of the opponent.
Okay.
So take here on the right, playing it reasonably passively because I know the opponent's going to bet into me quite often. Right, there unfortunately he didn't have a hand that wanted to bet, but say he just had air, he was going to bluff that. Say air jack, he might bet that. Right.
So your sizing there, you potted it when he checked. Was that?
Yeah, I mean, there he's basically got an ace, so, and he's afraid of the jack, of having trip jacks, so, that's why I potted it.
Okay, versus an optimal opponent, would you still use that size?
Probably not.
Okay.
It would be a fair bit smaller than that.
Yeah, that's what I figured. You can stab there a lot for like a third or something, I think.
Yeah, well, if they've got a lot of bluffs on the flop that just missed, you're gonna want to make them. You're gonna want to make them have a hard time rather than an ace. Now, in terms of the defending range, and playing against an open, not quite playing 3-bet or fold from every position, and the reason why that's the case is because my 3-bet size is very large. Because my 3-bet size is very large, some of the pocket pairs that don't quite want to 3-bet against those opens from that position won't be able to make it in there, so they'll just make it into a calling range, even if it's out of position.
How large are you 3-betting to?
Um,
Like if they 2.5x it.
Yeah, so 3-bet. So it depends. So here you'll see out of position. Essentially, you can 3-bet to a size that's roughly a 4-bet. Roughly most 4-bet sizes. There are 3-bet to
So like
almost
20
$1.
bigs or so?
Yep. Yep. So here are 4-bet. Here are 3-bet to 19 big blinds. Here I'm just letting it go. So on the right I was out of position and I 3-bet to 19 big blinds. So my 3-bet size out of position is going to be something around 20 big blinds, and in position is going to be a little bit smaller than that. I think 15 big blinds was the ones that I was using.
Can that sizing be a function of stacked up? Like, can you adjust based on stacked up, or is that irrelevant?
Yeah, I mean, if the stacks are shorter, you generally don't want to 3-bet more than a quarter of your stack. I mean, with a hand like Ace Queen there, Ace Queen might call it off. But against earlier positions, if I got Ace Queen and, like, say for example, the hijack or low jack 4-bet jammed into me and I've got Ace Queen offsuit, I'm probably just going to fold.
Yeah.
But the reason why I'm 3-betting to that size is because my opponent's not 4-betting the correct ranges, right? They're not 4-betting enough. then they're still
Yep.
calling with trash, right? Still calling with easily
Right.
dominated trash, and you'll see that eventually.
Now, using these odd sizes in an anonymous pool, that can sort of out you a little bit. I mean, I know you're not worried about it at 5 NL, but moving up to higher stakes and things, I think people would sort of pick up on that. But so, are you mainly doing it just because it's the fishy pool that it is that doesn't
Yeah,
three
I
bet
mean,
and flip?
each pool is going to have its own exploits, and the reason why I'm showing you this one first is because I know a lot of players, for whatever reason, struggle exploiting players at low stakes. The exploits that I'm using are pretty obvious when you think about them, right? How do you exploit players that don't 3-bet enough? How do you exploit players that call too wide? Well, you just have to size up, but you can't size up with the entirety of your range because some of those hands actually benefit from playing post-flop. So you just size up with the parts of your range that don't like playing post-flop or can easily
So, like, the
dominate
big
a very
offsuit
weak
hand.
lead. Yeah, so the big offsuit hands go for the larger size. The big offsuit hands with double blockers go for the larger size. They'll still get called by some suited trash. Alright, they'll play very well against the weak pocket pairs because they'll flop strong pairs and get the showdown. Yeah.
And I guess big pairs, because people will probably incorrectly try to set mine against a 20
So,
big blind 3-bet.
yeah, so the big pairs get used in the big open size. Knowing which open size to use from which position for which hands is somewhat important. In the low jack, I think that I would go with Queens plus and then King Queen, Queens plus or the King Queen or the Ace Queen or the Ace King into the larger size, including all the offset ones, right? Because those King Queen's got the double blocker to Kings and Queens, also blocks Ace King and King and Ace Queen, right? So it makes a lot of sense for that to be in the very large size, right? And then in later positions, I might add Jacks and Ace Jack suited, and King Jack, and Ace Jack offsuit, and King Jack, that kind of stuff. So here, for example, I'm not going with a larger size with Jacks, is because I'm in the low Jack, and it's actually not quite ideal to do the larger size with Jacks because it's not quite as strong.
What do you notice about people's 4-betting tendencies with aces? Like, do they slow play a lot, or do they just 4-bet all in a lot?
They're just going to 4-bet all in, which
Okay.
is actually another thing that's the opposite of what they should do. They should be trapping it basically all the time against a very large 3-bet.
That's what I was thinking, is because, I mean, they should expect to be able to get it in with such a shallow stack to power ratio.
Yeah, so they don't really understand that, so they're just going to 4-bet all in when they should be trapping it. Yeah. So I think here on the right is an example of just flatting it. Doesn't quite make it into the 3-bet range that I'm using. And yeah, just watch how I play that out of position. playing somewhat passively. I'm playing it roughly how I think a 9 would play, right? Because I double block the 9s. So if I think my opponent's going to check back 9s, then they're check back a 9, then I'm going to check to block the check back range. And the reason why I bet on the river is because I think that a 9 would bet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
Also,
it looks like he has showdown value too, right? Because otherwise he'd probably bluff the turn.
I've got no idea what he has. It's not really important to guess what your opponent has all the time.
so in a live environment, certainly when players aren't for betting enough, would you say the same principle still applies, that we should be sizing up?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the exploits that I'm showing you here can be used at low stakes live, because the players roughly play the same. The players that are in this pool are the same kinds of players that are playing low stakes live, right?
Yeah.
Like they play here drinking a beer or whatever on the weekend, and they play in the casino drinking a beer on the weekend. It's the same people.
Yeah.
Now,
So you mainly just going min raise or 5x?
yeah, so that's the strategy that I'm employing right now. So I 5x with the stronger part of my range and min raise with the weaker part of my range. You might want to employ a different strategy where you have 3 open sizes, and that's fine as well. Right, have a strong middle bottom. Right, strong opens bigger. Middle opens a little bit smaller, and then weak opens min. Right, and that's fine. Now another one, I folded the Queen 10 offsuit against the cutoff open. I think that's actually pretty standard if you look at the charts, but playing a little bit more snug in the big blind against an open. The reason why is because these players are in this pool are playing a mix of limp and open. So in general, when they open, the size is a bit stronger than it should be. So you should be playing a bit tighter. And you might also see that in live games as well. Although in live games, I know that players just open with anything from any position. So yeah. Yeah, so here I'm just starting in the cutoff. It's basically a set 9. I mean, the price is okay again, 3 big blinds. It's an okay-ish price. So here on the right, it's pretty difficult, but I don't think players can actually find enough bluffs on this kind of flop to be able to justify a pot size bet. So that's why I'm folding. Here on the river, it just looks like he's got a king. So yeah, go for the half pot raise. Or it's either a king or a 2 pair, isn't it? Just going basically as big as I think it would call is the exploit there.
So like with your big three betting strategy, a hand like Ace Jack here, I know is a normal strategy. It's sometimes three bet, but mostly call. Would you just like always call with your strategy here with Ace Jack off there? Just shift it to a pure call.
No, that is Ace Jack offsuit can sometimes make it in.
Okay.
It's just on the big blind. You've got much more options to choose from. So, generally, still wanting when you're three betting to this larger size, you generally still want to have two blockers. Rather than just one.
And when you three bet that large, so you're mainly stacking off of like queens and ace king, I guess.
Well, I would just stack off with whatever I think the value portion of the range is.
Yeah.
So if I'm three betting with queens plus ace king and some bluffs, then I'm just going to be stacking off with the queens plus ace king.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's fairly uneventful so far, but it's just an example of slowly increasing the amount of chips you got. Now, against a limp here in the big blind, once again using a couple of different raise sizes. Just use it 5x for the thinner value hands, and then something like 9 or 10 big blinds, or 8 to 10 big blinds for the even stronger ones. One thing to note, it's a slight variant on the game, is that the small blind is 0.4 of a big blind. You might not think it's you might not think that's much, but it does have some impact on the game. Generally, all the ranges are going to be a little bit tighter, especially from the small blind. All the ranges are a little bit tighter because there's a little bit less dead money in, and the small blind can't really limp because they're not getting quite as good of a price to limp.
Yeah. Well, I guess folding's not nearly as bad because it's like minus 40 BB per 100 instead of 50.
Yeah, exactly. So here on the left, probably say consider folding the flop, but the price is just too good. And the reason why I would consider folding the flop is because I know that the opponent is going to barrel too often. Right, so if your opponent's barreling frequency is very high, in general you want to fold more of the marginal hands and call more of the very strongest hands rather than raising them.
Do you think their barreling frequency is a function of having a really strong flop C betting frequency, or like, you know, where they give up a lot, or do they just barrel off like they're too wide on every street?
It's just because they're too wide on every street. Yeah, so on the left, open to 5 big blinds and then just they just rip it in 50 big blinds and I snap it off and they've got king 10 offsuit. So, yeah.
So if we flop like a strong draw, you think it'd be good to call flop and then jam turn?
It's often just better to just call it down. Jamming the turn doesn't really achieve much if they're just going to call with basically anything. And you'll see that in some of the hands that have been played here. Alright, so any other questions?
The overbet on the right on the flop was interesting. Button versus big blind, is that...
What was
like,
the
I
flop?
know, yeah, did you not just overbet the flop?
What was the flop? I didn't see it.
Jack 9 deuce.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're going to overbet flops like that. The reason being is it's kind of tough for your opponent to hit those kinds of flops. Jack high is probably the highest flop I do it with. Definitely 10 high and lower. I did do a tutorial on overbetting a flop, so if you want to get more information, you can watch that.
Yeah, I watched that. I'm
I mean,
familiar with
generally against flop overbets, if your opponents aren't continuing with anything except top pair, you can profitably bluff overbet with basically any two cards. Because you're only risking twice the pot. So if you're risking twice the pot, then they need to continue roughly a third of the time. But if they're only continuing like 10% of the time, then you're winning heaps.
Yeah, and I know optimally, if like all bottom pairs with a backdoor are supposed to continue, which I know opponents at the stake are not doing that.
So here on the left, I click it, and then I pot it. They make two pair on the river, and the flush comes in. And check the river, trying to get a check back from an ace, which is essentially what's going on. It's snap fold against the bet. Yeah, when I take the line of minning it and then potting it on the turn, essentially the opponent's range is going to shrink to some of the flush draws and a bunch of two pairs and some aces. So when I check, I'm hoping to get a check back from an ace essentially. Right. And when he makes a bet, his range is essentially majority just two pairs and flushes. And he doesn't really have enough of the backdoor flush draw to justify me calling. He has to be able to turn some hands into bluffs, which is pretty difficult for a lot of weak players to do. Turn some pairs into bluffs, that is.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to have like an ace with a weak kicker or something. A medium kicker. Like ace 9 maybe?
No, I mean, like if he's got like a jack or a queen, he has to turn that into a bluff.
Yeah, like jack 10, queen 10, I guess.
Yeah, so once again on the right, just raising to a size that I think he'd that he's most likely to call with the kind of hands that he's representing. In GTO, you might consider a much larger size. Often the opponents will overcall on the smaller bets and undercall to a very big bet. So that means that you can, against these bigger opponents, go for very big bets with much weaker hands. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, if you open to 5x and you get flatted, are you gonna check most flops that are like medium, like 9, 7, 3 or something?
Yep. I mean, it's got to do with like which flops hit you or hit your opponent. Like if you've got a flop which just smashes the opponent's range, often bending is not going to accomplish anything. Right, it's not going to accomplish much.
Yeah.
And even with a strong hand like an overpair, checking back and getting your opponent to stab into you is a better result than betting yourself. If you bet and they only continue, say you pot it and they only continue half the time, that's not quite as good a result as checking back and getting your opponent to stab into you 100% of the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's going to have to make it up to 20 and they fold.
Yeah, so this hand on the right, Thomas. I know like button versus big blind on paired flops where the pair is a rank like 9 or higher. I know betting small is typically the right play, but in this configuration, low jack versus big blind, are we gonna want to go for a more polar strat in general?
Yeah, so on the lower paired boards, right, generally the lower paired boards are just going to miss both players, and then it's just going to be who has more pocket pairs, and it's generally going to be, depending on what open size you use, it's generally going to be the opener who has the more pocket pairs, so especially the big ones. And those very big pocket pairs like aces and kings can be used in check back range and raise at later street.
Mm-hmm.
And that's talking in GTO, not just exploits.
Right.
And then when you do end up betting, you end up betting a slightly more bigger size, slightly more polar size.
Okay.
So they're with eights, betting reasonably large on the flop. Really trying to get caught by a 5, or some weird floats out of position. Alright, so you see on the right, it's called the raise pre-flop. And this is another thing that you can consider doing. You can consider having multiple 3-bet sizes as well. So if I want to have multiple 3-bet sizes and I want to put 9s into a slightly smaller 3-bet size, I could do that. So there's a variety of different ways that you can play against weaker opponents and make a buck, right? You don't have to play. You definitely don't have to play GTO, even though GTO is gonna win quite a bit on average. But you can make exploits here and there, and you can have, you can and probably should have multiple raise sizes, multiple raise and 3-bet sizes pre-flop. Here I'm just going with the 2 raise sizes and 1 very big 3-bet size, as well as a calling range. But you might decide to have 3 open sizes and 2 3-bet sizes. Right, a strong, like a top, middle, bottom open size, and then once again a strong and a not so strong 3-bet size with the calling range. Or you might decide to play 3-bet or fold, but have some of the hands which you 3-bet put into the bigger size.
Could you, well, if you were to implement like a 2 sizes out of the small blind, for example, would the minimum size for that small size still be 4x or something in that ballpark?
Yeah, so in the charts I've got 4x as a 3-bet, so you might decide to play 3-bet or fold from the small blind, right?
Yeah.
You might decide to play 3-bet or fold from the small blind, and so you're going to be using that as a base, except with the very strongest hands, right? The hands that would benefit from your opponent having 4-bet you go even bigger.
Okay, yeah.
Alright, any questions? I mean, pretty straightforward play so far. You know, on the right, the king queen suited, see what the flop as a draw bluff with the gut shot to the nuts, and then got jammed on and folded. Pretty straightforward there. Yeah, king queen also in the 5x.
Yeah, I mean, how would you adjust your like c-bet strategy when using the large size? Since your range is a lot stronger now, and we assume that they call still elastic, right? So
I'd assume it plays a little bit more like a 4-bet pot, right?
When you make the large 3-bet size, yeah, it plays it more like a 4-bet pot. Except in terms of it plays it more like a 4-bet pot. Except you've got all the nuts. from preflop, and when you've got the large open size, plays reasonably similar as a single raise pot with a large open size. Yeah, you can see there on the left, got a limp, and then I pumped it up to 90 blinds.
So in that configuration, from the opponent's perspective, he opened the hijack, you flatted the big blind. Flop was 10-6-5, I believe. What's kind of your overall strategy and position on that board?
10-6-5 hijack with the big blind. Yeah, I mean, in that kind of spot, you can definitely have some overbets. With like jacks and queens, maybe a little bit ace 10. And then for a smaller bet size, something like half pot, 3/4 pot, with the other hands in your range that you want to see about the flop with. It depends what raise size you use pre-flop. If you use a much smaller raise size, you're definitely going to be betting the flop more often, just because of the big range asymmetry. But that might just mean that you're betting the flop pretty often with a half pot bet size, and sometimes overbetting it.
Well, what kind of adjustments would you make, if any, facing min 3 bets from opponents?
Yeah, I mean, against a min 3 bet, you just have to call almost anything. I mean, some of the very weakest offsuit stuff in your range can fold. It depends what size you open and what size you got 3 bet to. If you open to 2x and you got min 3 bet to 3x, it's difficult to say whether that's just not a slip up from your opponent, or if you get 3 bet to 2x, 3 bet twice as big as your open, then you can start to fold a bit more. Generally, when it's a very small 3 bet, you're going to be calling quite wide. The 4 bet range is still going to be roughly the same 4 bet size.
So I'm thinking of the 4 bet size as a proportion of the pot, as opposed to like, well, I mean, it's the same thing, but you'd 4 bet to the same size you would if they 3x
to a normal size, yeah.
Right. And is there any strategical benefit to min 3 betting? I see it quite a bit at low stakes.
Yeah, there isn't really.
It's annoying, so it makes me think it might be something I want to try.
Yeah, I mean, all it does is really just try and knock out the blinds. But essentially, you're reopening. The thing is, you knock out the blinds, but then you reopen the pot to the original raiser. So, those two factors sort of counteract each other. I mean, it's good to knock out the blinds, but it's really bad to open the pot against the original raiser. For such a small price, the original raiser can just forward you a lot and continue with basically anything.
Right.
and the blinds might even just flat anyway. So
I guess if you're playing like anonymous, but at regular tables, maybe you could do it for image, because when you're min 3-betting, but also like going to 20 BBs, and then also like sometimes opening to 5x, you might look like the fish at the table, and I don't know. I mean, maybe might cause someone to like misplay against you. Like, I wouldn't do it a lot, but maybe when you first sit down, like do it once or twice, and then just don't ever do it again.
the reason why you're making the adjustments in the first place is because your opponent's going to misplay against you.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of benefit looking like a fish when you're playing against fish, so I wouldn't worry too much about your own image, especially against at that lower levels against weaker opponents. They don't have the tools available to properly exploit you if you're doing something weird like what I'm doing here. So just keep exploiting as hard as you're comfortable with, essentially.
Are there bots on Bodog?
No idea. Alright, so any other questions? I should have left for this recording. About an hour and a half. Yeah, I mean, so you can see there in the hijack, reasonable part of the opening strategy to have 7-8 suited at least some of the time. With these kinds of draws against the big blind, often because they're not check raising enough of the time, putting in a second barrel isn't quite as effective. So with decent draws, you'll see me c-bet at a higher frequency and then check back the turn, and that's to exploit the fact that they're not check raising the flop a lot. So those draws are often going to be able to see a river pretty cheaply, or get a fold on the flop, combination of the two.
So when you barrel turns, you're gonna have like much stronger draws then?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be much more like there. I've had the king of be barreling, but other than that, it's just going to be hands which more air type hands with a decent blocker of some sort. Yeah, so they got raise and a call and make it 25 big blinds. But the aces there, I mean, if they're gonna call with some pocket pair anyway, then
What is your opinion on like population reads? If you have like a read for a particular pool, for example, and for example they overfold to delay c-bet like 50% or so.
Yeah, I mean, so all the exploits that I'm making here is because I'm trying to exploit the population of players in anonymous fast fold games. You can't really exploit individual opponents, so that's why I'm making the plays that I'm making here. If I think that the opponent is gonna, if they think that the pool overfolds to delayed c-bet, then I'm gonna be trying to take that line a bit more often with my bluffs, rather than c-betting the flop. Essentially what that means, if they're overfolding to a delayed c-bet, essentially what that means is when you check back the flop, they're going to stab all their strong hands, and then when they check the turn, they're very weak, so you can make a fairly big bet into them and get it through a lot of the time. It's difficult because part of that is going to be GTO, the turn card which you give them is going to improve some of their range. But if it's just the fact that they are stabbing all their strong hands on probing all their strong hands on the turn, and not continuing with the and then checking the weaker hands, essentially that means they've got a very unprotected turn checking range, which you exploit by bluffing a lot into, or actually you exploit that by betting very big into it for both value and bluffs. But if your opponents aren't continuing, if they're folding a lot, then you're just going to bluff a lot.
That spot where you squeeze to 25 bigs, what kind of range are you using there?
So it's going to be something like queens plus ace king, ace queen, king queen. There might be some jacks in there as well. I can't remember the position. I think might have been hijack open. Jacks might make it in there. So I open to 5, get through it to 75, get a flat call, and then I just rip it in. It's a strange decision jack to call. So yeah, looks like we're chopping his chips. Yeah, I mean, the strongest hands from pre-flop is going to have an enormous expectation against weaker opponents. Or essentially, if you step back and look at what's happening is that I'm waiting for the very strongest hands, and that's where all my EV comes from. And the other hands, the weaker hands, are essentially just treading water. They don't make a huge amount of EV. I mean, I'm using my ability to outplay my opponent's post flop by opening to this smaller size, right? Hoping to get a fold, even though it's unlikely. It's more that I'm opening to a small size and then trying to outplay my opponent's post flop with these weaker hands, and then when I get a big hand pre-flop, I'm piling the money in. So with the weaker hands, they're going to be essentially treading water, and then you're waiting for the stronger hands. That's when you get the majority of your expectation. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, so when you're out of position, I guess you're not check raising that much because you said they barrel off too much.
Yeah. So I'm just delaying the check raise to a later street. Specifically, if I think they're going to barrel off multiple streets, barrel off all 3 streets, I'm just going to delay my check raise until the river.
Mm-hmm. In the games I play, like I notice there's a lot of players that bet flop and turn and then just check back river. Like I noticed that they have a really low river barrel compared to flop and turn.
Yeah, so then against those players, you delay your check raises until the turn.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to be c-betting the turn too often. And so essentially, if they're c-betting the turn too often and then checking back the river, all your check raises get delayed until the turn, which is when their ranges, which is when their range essentially is the most weak. Right, in order to have such a high turn c-bet frequency, you necessarily have to have a slightly weaker range. Also, the very strongest hands benefit from getting that second bet on the turn, rather than check raising the flop and then having the opponent having to call rather than bet for you. If your opponents are going to bet for you, then you might as well just let them. And then,
so would you check raise a lot of draws on the turn too then?
Yeah, if their range is quite weak. Notice that even in the big blind against even in the big blind playing reasonably tight, part of that is calling isn't so great. With rate being a bit higher, also the small blind is a bit less than money, and overall the raise sizes which the opponents are using are a bit stronger than they should be.
When delaying that raise to the turn and letting the opponent fire off, is it basically just board texture, which is going to help you decide whether or not you want to deny equity on the flop, or where you don't want him to see at the turn card for free, or does it matter?
Denying equity. I mean, like the thing
Like,
is, if you got a fairly wet flop, and your opponent is the kind of person who wants to deny equity themselves, like you sort of just let them do that. So that like they're going to be betting for you, so you shouldn't really have to. Yeah, so look on the left here. So I got 25 big blinds. I mean, yeah, you see how you still get calls from.
Yeah, he flats for like a third of his stack.
Somehow he's got ace king. Yeah. So you can.
Did they do that a lot with ace king? Just call to hit?
I've got no idea. So you can see how three betting to very large sizes is beneficial to you.
Yeah. Yeah, against the half stackers, I've been 3-betting to just half their stack. So if they have a 40 BB stack, I do that to 20 bigs, but I haven't been doing it against normal stacks.
Why are we sizing big with ace queen, king queen suited? Is it too thin versus the range? It calls a big 3-bet. No, if they're going to call with suited broadways, they become easily dominated by the ace queen and king queen suited. Yeah, I mean, if they're going to call with like queen jack, king jack, jack 10, queen 10, that kind of stuff, king queen does really well. Also against the pocket pairs, which is going to be the majority of their calling range. It's going to do pretty well. Like ace king, you would expect to jam. So when you've got king queen and ace queen, you just fold them to the jam. Yeah, so they're on the right. I think they faced a triple barrel with the tens. And I know it's near the top of the range, but often players just aren't creative enough to have bluffs in that kind of line. So you just fold everything.
So when they're not creative enough to have enough bluffs on the earlier streets, when they get to the river, overfolding makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't have bluffs in general, then you fold. All right, any other questions?
Do you 4-bet bluff at all in these games?
It's difficult. Yeah, I mean, just generally no. I mean, like the reason why I'm splitting my preflop range up the way I am is because my opponents aren't 3-betting enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your games, if your opponents aren't 3-betting you enough, you can just fold a lot against a 3-bet.
Seems
So
like
a big
in my
part of
game,
your
they like to 3-bet against min raises, but they don't like to 3-bet that much against like 3x's or bigger. But I mean, I haven't really looked at it in a database. It just seems like I get 3-bet a whole lot more when I min raise.
you're gonna have to kind of quantify that. In GTO, you're going to get 3-bet a lot of the time. Like we're talking close to a third of the time from when you open from the field, you're going to get 3-bet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess, I mean, it just seems like they go like wider and more linear against the min raise. Like, so if I 3x, maybe they'll flat with like king 10 suited or something. But if I min raise, then you know the button will just prefer to 3-bet with a hand like that.
Yeah, so I mean, once again, you're gonna have to quantify it. If your opponents are 3-betting too often against a min raise, then essentially what you can do is you can open slightly bigger with your medium hands and then smaller with your very strongest hands, expecting a 3-bet.
How funny. I don't even think that they're going too wide. It seems like they just play more correct against the min raise. Like they, it's less flatting, more 3-betting. But they just kind of flat too much against like bigger raise. I even experimented with like just potting it as a standard size. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could just min raise to induce more then if they 3-bet a lot more against that.
Yeah, if they're 3-betting a lot, then change the ranges around to benefit from that. Yep, no worries. Any other questions? I mean, we've got like an hour left of this video. So if you guys want to continue with this, we can continue. Do you want to have flats against 3x? Yeah. So here, when I'm playing this strategy, I'm not playing 3-bet or fold. So you necessarily have to have flats, basically as definitionally, because my only 3-bet size is that very big 3-bet size to like 15 in position and 20 out of position. I'm going to have some flats. And so you'll see that when I'm in the button and small line and even cutoff, I'll be flatting. Specifically, it's the pocket pairs because they do reasonably well, and even multi-way. I mean, it's not amazing to go multi-way with those hands, but the benefit of going multi-way is that you increase the size of the pot, so your effective odds that you've paid is a little bit better on essentially your set mine, and it's mainly the slightly stronger pocket pairs that are going for that set mine rather than the weakest pocket pairs. The weakest pocket pairs end up getting set at a set a bit too much from my liking, especially against a 3x open, which you're not getting amazing odds in the first place.
So if you're on the cutoff, what's like the worst pocket pair you're flatting with? Like against the 3x?
It depends who opens, but you can probably go as low as 6s, maybe even 5s against a hijack probably. I think I flatted 7s once in this video.
Yeah. And then are you flatting like all the pairs if they just min raise?
Yep. You can definitely do that on the button. And the cutoff is a little bit more arguable. Yet you still want to fold the weaker pocket pairs.
So still like probably 5s plus or 4s plus.
Yeah, it's going to be up to you to decide. here on the
Yeah.
right, like when it goes bet call, when I've got like ace nine there, essentially I'm calling to draw for a chop. So that's why it's pretty easy to fold there. There, 9-6 body against the cutoff open. In Narrow ante, yeah. So in MTTs, you want to have a lot more flats in the later positions. Because there's no rake and there's antes as well. So a really good argument to have flats there, just because you're getting really good odds. Of course, it depends on what open size they use, but usually if they're using a small open size, you're going to have really good odds to flat in position.
I guess if there's antes and it's like 10%, then you only need to do better than minus 10 BB per 100 to flat an ante game, right? Because that's what your win rate will be if you fold.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. It depends on the size of the ante. Yeah, you're gonna lose at least some EV from not flatting those positions. When there's antes with antes, it's really just because you're getting really good odds is the main thing. You'll see in the pre-flop sims that I've run against a 3x open, basically from any position that the small blind won't have flats. They won't have a lot of flats. They'll have only like 1 to 2% flats. So you can argue that when you're getting quite poor odds at a position in the small blind there, you can let go of a lot of hands and play 3-bet or fold. Yeah, so here just 4-betting to like 20% of the stack.
So a minute ago you had ace king, big blind versus small blind, and you 3-bet and you bet 35 cents into $1.50, I think. Are you going to be like betting pot, for example, on the turn after that, or are you just going to keep betting small?
Yeah. So the reason why the small bet makes sense there is because that kind of board is pretty good for your range, or at least your perceived range. So you want to go a bit more polar on the turn. A lot of the pocket pairs that would 3-bet pre-flop kind of just want to get one small bet against a weaker pocket pair. But with your ace king, king queen kind of stuff, you're going to want to size up and basically get the money in. A lot of tournaments are big blind ante games nowadays. Yeah, so I mean, big blind ante is the same as like everyone putting in 1/6 of an ante or whatever. It's just, especially for live tournaments, it's easier if the big blind just chucks their ante in and no one else does, because then you have to deal with, especially in a full ring tournament, like 9 or 10 people putting in 1/10 of a big blind as the ante. It's basically the same as having an ante of a big blind. Yeah, I mean, in terms of pot odds, you get the extra big blind of dead money in there. So you just change your odds around. You just recalculate the different odds for a call against the different open sizes. I mean, if you look at my sims against the small open sizes, you get cut off fighting against both the hijack and the low jack sometimes. I mean, it's not nowhere near as much as the button, but definitely there are some flats. Yeah, it's against a 2x open with 5% rake kept at 1 big blind. 5% rake's pretty standard in most cash games, and then the 1 big blind cap would mean between 100 NL and 500 NL, depending on what you're playing. So there could be an argument for in the high raked cash games to not have flats in the cutoff, and even in the high raked cash games, you can probably not even have flats on the button against larger open sizes, which is kind of what you'll see in the Zenith ranges that are currently on the website. They're a little bit old, but playing the 3-bet off old is pretty good. I mean, the calling, having a calling range will increase the expectation of some of your hands slightly, even if they're all. Usually, you're never going to see pure flats in most sims. In the majority of sims, there'll be any hand that flats will have some 3-bet frequency, with the exception of the big blind. Actually, sometimes the small blind as well. So a lot of the time there'll be the option to play 3-bet off fold if you think of it that way. But 3-bet off fold comes from the opponents not playing well in 3-bet pots. I mean, that's sort of the main reason why 3-bet off fold is so effective, is because weaker opposition don't play well out of position in 3-bet pots. Yeah, in 3-bet pots, if people call too wide pre-flop, just going to fold a lot to the flop bet, and that's okay in terms of GTO, but just loses a fair bit of expectation pre-flop, like having those weakest hands that don't flop very well in there end up just hemorrhaging chips because they call pre-flop and then face a flop bet too often. Alright, any other questions? Which one was? Under an hour? Yeah, I mean, usually you want to play a 3-street game. in the 4-bet pots, even at the stacked pot ratio, you can just make it 2 streets. Often the expectation of playing 3 streets is better. I think I did a tutorial earlier talking about 4-bet pots. You can watch that again if you'd like. Go and discuss the benefits of playing the 3-street game. Essentially, getting 3 bets is always better than 2 for the same amount of chips. It increases the width of the felting range. It increases the width of the range, which gets all in by playing it 3 streets rather than 2. Although if you just play 2 streets and then jam it on the turn, they might have to call a bit wide because they need to try and prevent you from effectively bluffing with draws, but often that's counteracted by the fact that they're going to have some draw equity against you on the turn still. Yeah, so there on the turn you can consider making the 3-bet to a very big size, but with King Queen offsuit, it's a little bit weak. It's going to be the sort of bottomish of the range that would do that. Yeah, I go slightly smaller here because both opponents in the pot here are a bit short. Generally, yeah, okay, they call anyway. Generally, 3-betting to a quarter-ish of between a quarter and a third of the stack. And I get it in, I think I'm ahead on the flop. With my nut flush draw on turbo cards. Yeah, I mean, when I 3-bet there to a third of the stack, they should be essentially playing jam or fold. So like it makes the opponents have to do the opposite of what they like to do. That they just like to call. So the adjustment is to play jam or fold, but they like to call. So they're going to have to adjust in a way that's the exact opposite of what they've been doing the entire time. Which is very difficult for them to make that adjustment. Yeah, I mean you can consider playing jam or fold when they've. Are we playing jam or fold as a razor when villain puts 20 big blinds in as a 3-bet? Yeah. So if your opponent is 3-betting to 20 big blinds, I'm probably just going to play jam or fold. There's no sense calling. I mean, the reason why I'm making the 3-bet so big is because the opponents are still going to call, as you've seen. They're still calling with trashy hands. Rather than playing all in or fold, which is what they should be doing. You can look through the preflop sims. The preflop sims will have a 3-bet up to 1.25 pot from in position and like 300% out of position. Usually if they 3-bet to near a quarter of the stack, you can just not have folds when you're out of position. So you can just not have calls when you're out of position, just play 3-bet or fold. which is kind of what's going on here, where I 300% sometimes GTO. I mean, 250% definitely. You'll see 250% being used versus the button from the big blind versus the button. 300% not quite as much. But the 250% against a min is like 13.5 big blinds, 14 big blinds. Right, and there's not a huge difference there. I mean, against a small open or against a 3x open, if you saw it earlier on, there was a few min opens, and I threw it to 15 big blinds, 15 big blinds in position and 20 big blinds out of position. So it's the same. So yeah, they're on the left with the threes. You can argue for a call as well, preflop, because you're closing the action. Just the odds aren't amazing on a set mine. Generally with low pocket pairs, because you're going to get set a fair bit of the time against players that like to set mine a lot. Like if they're, what was it, the cutoff? It's basically all pocket pairs. When you get it in against cutoff, you're going to get in against a set. So not quite as amazing as it should be. Alright, so any other questions? I'm not sure whether the rest of this is going to be super interesting, or it's going to teach you very much, because the strategy is pretty much laid out. You guys have any other questions specifically about the strategy that I'm using here? Oh yeah, against a limp out of position is making it very big. As you'll see from Sims as well.
You bet the ace jack suited to 15 bigs. Like, what other suited hands are you 3-betting to that size? Like, are you
Yeah,
doing it
so
with
king
like
queen suited, ace queen suited,
Queen
ace
Jack
king
suited?
suited. I mean, queen jack suited is probably it might be better as a flat. But I guess you can consider putting it in there. Some of the times, and then playing cautiously when you flop a pair. Basically hands with good double blockers are pretty good. Not sure skill edge is enough versus weaker players. I don't understand what you mean by that. You're gonna have to elaborate. Do you think suited connectors and suited aces are overrated as flats by most people? Yeah. Especially against very big sizes, they actually play pretty horribly. The only Hold'em is all about the pocket pairs pre-flop. The entire game is about the pocket pairs pre-flop. Once you understand that, then the rest kind of makes sense. Maybe I should elaborate a bit more. Like when I'm 3-betting here, I'm 3-betting to sizes where I get my opponents to still flat the pocket pairs. At least some of the times. So that essentially maximizes the amount of expectation I would get with a very big pocket pair. And then when I've got a strong Broadway hand, I can reasonably easily outdraw them in a stack to pot ratio which is low enough that the pocket pair doesn't play very well. So it becomes very difficult for the opponent to flat a middling to weaker pocket pair against the big 3-bet.
Yeah, I guess like
And
a
they're
fish
gonna
is
call
never
it
gonna
a-
fold eights to like a 20 big blind 3-bet.
Yeah, exactly, right? So when you've got aces and kings, that's how you get the most amount of value from pre-flop. And then on the flop, if they flop another pair or like a flop comes jack high or something, they're going to put you on ace king and then stack off anyway. That's where you're making all the money here against the weaker players. You'll see in the pre-flop sims, the 3-bet sizes being used make the pocket pairs indifferent. The ranges and sizes used make the pocket pairs indifferent to between calling and folding. So yeah, it's all about the pocket pairs.
So like hypothetically, let's say we 3-bet to 20 bigs and the flop is like jack 7 deuce or something. Are you gonna c-bet like your whole range there against the caller?
I mean, it might not be necessary to do that when you're out of position, because if you just check, your opponent's going to bet for you.
Okay.
Right? If your opponent's quite happily putting in a bet themselves, right? Quite happily betting themselves when you check. If you got like aces or kings, there's no real reason to bet.
How about if we have like king queen there?
Yeah, I mean, if you got king queen and you bet and they're basically calling their entire range, it doesn't make any sense. So you can just fold that.
So you just check range there and just check jam, I guess.
Yeah, you can check jam, or you can just flat and then get them to barrel off into you. Either is fine.
Okay. Well, if they don't have any bluffs, really, I get like, or very few, then we should just jam though, right? Because they're just gonna bet call. If they have like eights on the jack high board, I don't want the turn to spook them.
Yeah. And it might not be as big a problem with specifically aces, because even if the turn spooks some of their range, you still stack the other part of their range, which likes the turn card. Yeah, in GTO, the 3-bet sizes makes the small pocket pairs indifferent. It makes them essentially they can't set mine quite so easily. That's why if you look at the sims, the 3-bet sizes that are used most often are actually quite large. Like if they open to 2 or 2.5 from the button or cutoff, something like that. We're 3-betting to 12, 13, 14 from the blinds. And so they have to call 10 big blinds, right? So they can't really set mine so easily.
Theoretically, do you think it makes sense for them to have like a click back 4-betting range against such a big sizing?
No, because then they put in more than a third of the stack, and so you can just play jam or fold against it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess aces wants the flat anyway, so it doesn't really make sense either. I guess it's just really hard to bluff against such a big sizing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed it earlier. I mean, against a big 3-bet sizing like the one that I'm using here, essentially you can just play jam or fold. I mean, when you're in position of essentially you can play 4-bet or fold. There's some scenarios where we don't 3-bet ace jack off, but we 3-bet ace 10 suited. I don't really understand what you mean by that. You're gonna have to elaborate.
Oh, because of the double blocker thing?
The thing with the double blocker is you got against opponent that will open and call too often and not 4-bet enough. Both those hands will want to 3-bet. I don't understand why you wouldn't 3-bet either of them. Ace jack off and ace 10 suited. I mean, because both ace jack off and ace 10 suited dominate all the junk that they're gonna call with. They're gonna call with king jack off suit, jack 10 suited, that kind of stuff. Then both those hands will dominate it. And still do pretty well against the weaker pocket pairs that they'll call with. Yeah, I mean, if you look in the sims, you'll see that sometimes you get some flats with ace 10 suited on the button against an opening range, but or the ace jack offsuit will 3-bet, or at least the majority of it will 3-bet. I think that's what happens. If you've got access to the early access preflop simulations, you'll be able to see it. I think especially against the hijack. Don't remember off the top of my head whether it's ace jack suited or ace 10 suited, but I think both of them are funding at pretty high frequency on the button. Alright, any other questions? Do you guys want to go through the rest of this? Got about half an hour left. Or do you guys want to call it now?
I'm happy to go through the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much the same. Same idea as what's going on. I mean, you can argue for a call there, but, you know, playing a bit tighter, out of position in the big blind, especially against players that like to see bet the flop a lot. King Jack offsuit, a bit too weak against the low jack.
Are you normally opening Queen 5 suited from the cutoff?
Yeah, I think if you look at the sims, you got Queen 5 suited in there a little bit of the time. And it's definitely Queen 6 suited. When people throw out position, I know people will often stab when check too, but also don't know how they respond to what receive bets. I mean, if they're always going to stab, like, or they're going to stab like very often, like, it just makes more sense to check. If they overfold, it makes more sense to check and then raise, because, like, think about it, if they're going to stab the majority of their range and respond poorly to a raise, you're going to make a lot more by check raising than you are just c betting, and it is usually because they're calling too wide in general in pre-flop, which is why I'm using this very big size here in this video here. Alright, so I guess for future tutorials like this, I'd want you guys to create your own videos, so just do it the same way that I've done on whatever you want, just to Zoom or whatever, on one screen, and then just record yourself playing. Don't have to have the sound or anything. And then yeah, send it to me, and then we can go and look through and analyze all the hands.
Alright, sounds good.
Yeah, I think that will help a lot.
Yeah, it just needs to be about an hour and a half long. Doesn't have to be too long. Probably about an hour, because we're probably going to be stopping the video a bit more. Here we haven't stopped the video, so if we're going to be stopping it and going back and looking at the hands in a bit more depth, then we'll only need about an hour worth of footage. All right, great. Yeah, I mean, it's much of the same. Do you guys have any last minute questions?
Do you have a video on multi-way pots?
Yeah, there's a few tutorials on multi-way pots.
Okay.
Just look for the group tutorials. I think you'll
I'll
find
have
it.
to watch that. I play on 888, and I noticed that a lot of the pots go multi-way if I min raise. Like, well, like if I min raise from the button, like I noticed that the small blind just calls with an incredibly wide range.
Yeah, just watch through that. Watch that video, should be fine.
Yeah, maybe we can just summarize and call it maybe.
Sorry, say again?
No, maybe we can summarize the adjustments.
You want me to summarize the adjustments that I made? Yeah, so
Mm.
we're playing a bit tighter against the open. We're splitting the opening range into two sizes, one for min raise and the other sizes being the 5x. Although you might decide to have a variety of different open sizes, but I've just done with two to make it simple for you guys to be able to follow along. And I've also, instead of playing the 3-bet or fold, I'm 3-betting to a very big size with the stronger parts of the range and being a bit more polar with the blockers, and then having a calling range with the strong with the middling kind of hands, and then just folding the very weakest ones. Although you might decide to still play 3-bet or fold, but have two different 3-bet sizes. One very big size with the very strongest hands, and one slightly smaller size. Another thing, a bit more post-flop, you've got playing a little bit more passively against players that like to c-bet, like to barrel off a lot. When they're barreling off a lot, you basically just want to be calling with the top of your range and folding, calling with the top of the range and then delaying that raise until a later street. And with the weaker parts of the range, you're going to be folding a bit earlier, even if that means pre-flop, right? So if they're going to be c-betting the flop too often, when you've got to hand that flop sort of marginal pairs, you're going to be folding that pre-flop, and then on the flop you're folding a little bit earlier on because you're expecting your opponent to continuation bet the later streets instead of giving up as much as they should. When you're drawing with some of the draws, you're going to be playing them a little bit more passively, especially in position, rather than raising them. Of course, you can still raise draws that don't have any showdown value.
Yeah, I saw, like, for example, like turn barrel. I think I'm maybe betting too often compared to what I've seen in this so far. So maybe, as you said previously, like check back the turn after c-bet a bit more.
Yeah. Keep calling the marginal hands. I mean, the reason why the c-bet frequency is so high in the first place is because they're betting all the middling hands instead of checking them back. Right. So those middling hands will still beat you. So you can't call down with the very marginal hands. Which is another reason why, like, when they check back, they fold so often against a bet, because the range is just gutted because they don't have any strong hands which check back. All right, so I think there's a bit of a summary. Any last minute questions? But we end up overfolding. Yeah, I mean it's fine for us to overfold because they're not bluffing enough. They've got. Yeah, they're essentially not bluffing enough when they just bet the top of their range. Like if they're betting like everything, every pair and every strong draw, and then it's checking back air. You're going to be overfolding against that. And that's fine. That's the adjustment that you're making against the opponent. It's okay to overfold against people that don't bluff. So you can see here on the right, I'm just checking back the strong draw. Yeah, if they're just betting the top, like 70% of the range, you just fold. you just fold a lot of hands. And then when they check, you can basically just blast them.
So
If you had like ace eight of hearts, are you c-betting there?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you definitely do want to have some strong draws in that spot. In that spot in particular is when it opens to 5x, so it's difficult to say either way because I probably don't have ace eight of hearts in the 5x opening range. But say for example I did somehow, then yeah, I would consider betting there. And then if I did bet, I would probably just pot it into them because on that kind of board, basically it's going to be who has the most overpairs, and it's going to be you. So essentially you're representing either an overpair or a bluff. So want to go a bit bigger. So here's an example of just a flat against a low jack. It's an interesting hand, I think. Flop bottom set, and here I'll show you how I played it. You see, I'm playing reasonably passively because I know that the opponent on this kind of board is going to barrel off. Right? This is an example.
Oh, yikes.
Check raise is kind of a bit strange. Don't understand how they can do that with eights. But yeah, you can see, for example, there like eights is definitely a check give up at some stage, but they just decided to bet twice for whatever reason, and then check raise the river. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, you can see the flooding there, and to get the extra value from the opponent's barreling off.
say for example, if we're in a similar spot but out of position, since we know that they barrel the turn kind of often, but from my experience they don't really barrel 3 times as a bluff too often.
Yeah, so then you just delay your check raise until the turn. So you're gonna be just calling the flop and then check raising the turn. Let's say someone barrels the flop with top pair plus and all draws and follows through the river always. Fine to overfold versus that. Yeah, I mean, so you can overfold on the earlier streets and then always call the river, because there'll be other bluffing on the river. And the reason why you're overfolding on the earlier streets is because essentially you need to be calling the river bet as well, because you're always going to face the river bet. All right, any other questions? No more questions? Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's not much else to that. All right. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. So I don't know, this one on the right is a bit weird. If you guys got something out of it, you can come up with some different exploits in your own games. And if you have any questions, you can always just go through and watch the video again, and then just send a message in the or just write a message into the Discord or the Facebook. Either will be fine. Yeah. 6 sometime. Great. All right, let's pause this here.
Yeah, that was really cool. Thanks for the tutorial.
Yeah, no worries. All right, if there's any other questions, I'm going to stop the recording now. Anyone who's watching this after the fact on the YouTube or on the website, thank you for watching. And if you've got any questions, you can always send a message on either the Facebook group or the Discord. All right, so yeah.